All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Happy Thursday. I won't be putting my webcam on today, so you won't be seeing my sparkling face. So that hopefully that will avoid some of the tech issues that's happened the last couple of weeks. But as always, if the screen freezes or something like that, just let me know. I'm snacking on some cashews right now, so if you hear me, that's why I just didn't quite have time for lunch. So I hope you don't mind. Okay. Today, and let me just check my feed, make sure, I'm feeding it the right way. Today, I'm going to share my screen with you guys. Today's agenda is a continuation from last week's agenda. So last week, I went over some basic web programming in HTML, XHTML, CSS, and moving towards HTML5 as a concept. It was a brief introduction, sort of a hodgepodge of stuff. So I have the video of last week's class that you can look at, and I'm recording this week's class to add to that. I also included some links, and in this week's stuff, I will also include some links as well once we're done today. Okay, and again, these are just these presentations now are just for you guys to prepare you for things that could be coming up in your post-secondary studies, and so hopefully they're useful to you guys. So this is what we looked at last week. This idea of HTML, okay, leading to XHTML, okay, and HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language, and the X stands for extendable, so it's just a little bit further along. XML, extendable markup language, it sort of takes the hyper out of it, and CSS, which we're going to get to mostly today, Cascading Stylesheet. We'll kind of look at why it's called that. How HTML was about the structure of a website and CSS was about the appearance. And then these other little add-on things, JavaScript, PHP, all those things that add on to the web and bring it more into the realm of a programming language. We looked at that. We looked at the basic structure of HTML, the concept of a tag, which is like I mentioned, like when an English teacher marks up what you're writing in an English essay, a tag marks up what's going on in the text of a website. These tags create a container effect where you open the container, close the container, and what you put inside that container becomes the container. And then we expanded that into how tags can then add things called attributes to enhance the tag, make it a little bit more interesting. This was some of the web programming we did. So here you can see a basic italics tag opens and an italics tag closes. A bold tag opens and a bold tag closes. So we have a container right here making it italics, and then another container around that making it bold. So containers inside of containers. We also had some tags like this one, the horizontal rule, which close themselves. So they don't have an opening and closing. They end up using the slash character to close itself. So it's really only one tag. And then we looked at a tag called the font tag, which here's the opening tag, but now I've enhanced that tag using an attribute. And I've given that attribute a value, which changes the font tag significantly. So with those little pieces in place, what it did was it created this basic web page right here. So there you can see the bold and italics, and here you can see the font, the face or the font itself changing, and there you can see the horizontal rule. We also added one other thing, which is the background color attribute to the entire body of the website. So there is certainly tons and tons more tags that you can start looking at. Tons and tons, and that was actually one of the reasons why originally HTML kind of was built and it started getting too bloated, too many tags, too many attributes, too many values. And then XHTML was kind of a return to what HTML was originally designed for, which was just to be structure. So they said, okay, well, we want to move it back to just structure, but we don't want to lose all these cool appearance things. So we're going to transition to CSS, which will focus on appearance and give you a little more flexibility with appearance. So that's what I'm going to look at today. I also want to point out that all the stuff that I'm going to be mentioning to you guys about this, I'm making note of, and I'll link in for you guys, right? So from the surveys you guys did to the presentation I did on algorithm analysis and big O notation and things like that. Now, the stuff that I pulled from the Red River program course on web pages. Now, other stuff in that Red River program will be what I'm planning for the future as well. Like you notice here some of the stuff that is in their Programming 2 concept. But as you remember last time I showed you this stuff from the Red River website on what they're teaching. I made a kind of a list of things we can do. HTML, XHTML tags, attributes, and values. So we got through about half of that. And this is kind of what I wanted to look at today. Okay. But I'm also going to provide more resources for you guys, right? Like a resource between the differences between HTML and XHTML and HTML5, and then some CSS resources, some JavaScript resources, PHP, MySQL, SQL, Node.js. I will provide you with these resources, of good resources for that. I've already linked on my website links to some of my resources, my teaching files for you guys, so kind of making a one-stop shop for resources. And I've even started thinking about next time. So what I hope to do is finish this concept of web programming today, but of course you guys can drive this. If you want me to do more of this or less of this, I certainly can. But next time I'm going to look at the concept of hash tables and graphs or graph theory. Okay? This is another high-end sort of programming concept that we can look at that I know showed up in both the U of M content and the Waterloo content, and certainly shows up a little bit in the Red River content. And then I actually have let me back up here for a sec. This was based on the survey you guys did. So you might remember analysis of algorithms was a big one that was voted on. And then graph theory came up along with hash tables came up. And you can see here it came from U of M's course, second year course, Waterloo's course, okay? Hash tables and such was something that was directly emailed to me by one of you. But then another one of you added the concept of design patterns to something you'd like to learn. So you might have noticed that at the bottom of what I thought about maybe in the future we could look at. Design patterns or paradigms, and a little more about unit testing. These two concepts are certainly taught in post-secondary, but really these are two concepts that are more involved in the industry of computer science and sort of the software development job. So what I'm going to reach out for is a guest lecturer. So some of the people I've been getting some of those two testimonial videos for work in the industry, and I think it might be nice to hear, and again, I don't know if they're going to do it or not, but I'm going to invite them to actually do a future online class with you guys. And again, I'll record it if you can't make it live, which will give you an idea of what they see that concept of, both when they studied it in post-secondary and the way they apply it now in their day-to-day job. Whew! So that's my plan. I think it's a pretty good plan for you guys. I'm working hard to deliver this content to you guys. So what I want to talk about today is the concept of CSS. Okay, and we already talked about what this acronym stands for. Cascading Style Sheet. Okay. So sheet really doesn't have much specifically interesting thing about it. A sheet is just text. Okay. The concept of a style fits in with the idea that CSS is designed to change the appearance, right? It changes the appearance or the style of the text. The one that really takes some analysis, and you'll see why it is called that as we approach it. Cascading, as I said before, think of it like a waterfall where one thing sort of cascades down to the other. you'll kind of see where that goes. Okay, so with CSS, it's a different coding style. Kind of like the difference between C# coding language, might be a better way to put it. Sort of like the difference between C# and Java, it's certainly different. Okay, it isn't really that much different, but it is got some specific differences between the two programming languages. Simple example might be bool versus boolean, or final versus constant or const. So it is a different coding language, and I'm going to show you how it applies in a website. Now, I also thought today, instead of doing it the way we did it last time, which was to just code a simple thing and then use something as simple as Notepad++, I'm not going to use Notepad++ today. Instead, I'm going to actually use NetBeans. And I'm going to make a new project in NetBeans, but I'm not going to make a Java project. I'm going to make an HTML5 project, which is an option you can do in NetBeans. And I'm going to make and here you can see again, it can get way more complicated, but I'm just going to make a simple HTML5 application. I'm going to stick it in a folder, HTML5 application, a basic website. Yes, it's got a lot of features where you can set up it based on templates, but I'm not going to do that. And create it. Now, it's going to give me a lot of files that I'm not going to go into today, but it will give me a simple HTML file that I can work on as well. Okay. So here you can see it created at least one file, an HTML file, called the index page. That's often the very first page of a website is the index page. Now, it did give me other stuff in here as well. A lot more other things in here that it can use for different aspects that I'm not going to really get into. So I'm going to close all those other files and just focus on the index file. And it's frozen. Hopefully, oh, there we go. Okay. So as you can see, it provided me with a series of tags right away, which is really handy, right? So it gave me a bunch of tags. This tag, for example, is a comment tag. That's how you do comments in HTML. This, what's called the Doctype tag, sort of helps web browsers define, ooh, is this just an HTML page? Is this an XHTML page, etc. Okay. The HTML tag is usually used to define the entire website page. And then there's a head section and a body section. The body section is what we see. So in theory, what you see right here should show up on the website. And actually, you can, just like you would a Java project, run it. And you can connect NetBeans to a specific web browser to actually just do it the way you would do it that way. So that's pretty cool, okay? Ooh. Let me just make sure it's connected to Chrome that way. Try it again. There we go. So it right away just does that, which is really cool. So it sets up a lot of that stuff for you. And NetBeans isn't necessarily the best web page editor out there, but it does provide you at least with some familiarity of stuff you already know. Okay. So this is my web content. Okay. Now, like any kind of programming, you want to use spaces to your advantage here. Okay. Now, you can see as well, it's put a lot of other little tags and things in here that you can certainly look up the details on. But where I want to go right now is into the concept of CSS. With CSS, there are generally 3 types of CSS. Okay? One is called inline, and we'll look at that one first. One is called embedded. Called linked. And this is actually where the cascade theoretically happens. Okay, so I'm just going to add one other thing to this. So you can certainly have traditional HTML or even XHTML code that, say, changes the appearance of a font like we did. So it would do that. So it would go, okay, I'm going to do that. But then inline CSS, very much like the concept we do with classes when you have a method overloading, this would then be done first. So let me just pull this sort of a different way. So HTML could be thought of as at the bottom, and then inline, then embedded, and then linked would be how it would do this. So if you have some code in here that, say, changes the appearance of the text, it would do this first. Okay? So this would be kind of at the top of what's called the cascade. So if you decided to make a change here, the change would cascade down to all the other sort of features in that. Okay? So we'll kind of see that through example today. I'll sort of show you what that is. But that's really what the cascading effect is doing, is it's cascading between HTML, inline, embedded, and linked content. Okay, so what you're about to see here, and I'll even put in a comment. It's been a while, but I'm pretty sure I can remember what a comment looks like. This is inline CSS. Oh yeah, I forgot you got to put those two things there. There we go. So that creates a comment in CSS. All right, so what does inline CSS look like? Well, it's put right inside the tag. So inline implies that it's being put into the tag, in the line of the tag. So it's kind of like an attribute, and actually it starts off as an attribute. Now, by the way, this tag, the div tag, is just what's called a divider tag. It's a very simple tag. So I'm going to put the attribute style. Okay. So what you've already seen is this is an attribute. This is its value. But now the value becomes CSS right here, because the value for the style attribute is to use inline CSS. So I'm going to leave quite a bit of space there, because right in here I can create inline CSS goes here. And believe it or not, that's actually how you make a comment in CSS, the same way you do there. Unfortunately, it won't work that way in inline. So, so inline CSS is going to look a lot more like Java and C# that you're used to. So this is where the inline CSS goes. It goes between the opening quote and the second quote. So I'm just going to change this tag. So I'm going to change the style of this tag, and I'll use one piece of CSS to do this. Now with CSS, the way it works is it uses a system for CSS where you have a property. So now you're going to see some of the same kind of wording that you would have seen in our Java lectures, right? So the programmers who came up with CSS were definitely a lot more sort of in line with sort of the modern idea of coding, right? So property goes here, then a colon. Okay. So property is property, and then a colon, and then over on this side you have a value, and at the very end, guess what? A semicolon to end this, what's called this rule. This is a CSS rule right here. So that's what this defines. This, come on. This piece of code right here defines a CSS rule. So if I put a rule in place, it will change the appearance of that tag. Okay? But again, it's based on this idea of a property, then a colon, then a value, then a semicolon. The semicolon ends the rule. The colon separates the property from the value. Okay, let's see it in an example. So, a property, font. And I'm going to use this one called font family. So that's the property I'm going to change. Notice NetBeans put the semicolon in there for me. Then on this side, I'm going to put a this case, I'm going to put it in quotes, the value. So I'm going to pick Arial Black. This is my font, and then a semicolon. Oh, maybe I don't use, sorry, I don't think I actually do use the quotes here. So just do it that way. There we go. So will my web content show up in Arial? It's hard to tell because Arial is already a font that we're familiar with. So I'm going to use Consolus. That's one that definitely looks different. So I'm going to use that font family, save this, even though I don't really need to, and run it. And there you see it's actually changed the font content to Consolus. Jump back, go back to Arial, run it, jump back here. Now it's Arial. So it's applying that particular rule in the line of this CSS. Okay? Now normally you don't write it like this with the comments and all that. Normally the way I'd write it would be a lot simpler. It would just look like this. And just say, oh, there, I'm just applying this one style rule to this particular font tag inline. So it does that. Okay? But I wanted to put that in there because now I can add another rule. Font size. Okay. And size is one of those ones that, and I'm going to use tabs here to make it look all pretty. Actually, I often, when I do CSS, I do a couple things all separate. I know it's a little bit over. Okay. So what would I want for a size? Well, like a lot of things, this is a lot more flexibility. In regular HTML, you could just use some simple numbers and make the font go up and down. But font size with CSS has a lot more flexibility to it than it did in HTML. So for example, I can put 50 PT right here, which means 50 points. So this is very much like what you do in Microsoft Word. You go from a 10-point font to a 12-point font. But anyways, that should now, as you can see, actually change the web content significantly. Way more than I could have done with regular HTML. But it also gives me more flexibility. I could actually put IN right here, which actually stands for inches. So you can actually use an inches style of measurement. This is now huge, right? 50 inches, right? Okay, well, whoops. What about if I went with millimeters? Would it actually recognize that? Absolutely it would, right? So it's got a lot more flexibility. I can even use things like decimal numbers, which again gives me a lot more flexibility into how it makes that appearance of that content show up. So that's where you can start to see the power of CSS as a feature beyond what you could do in HTML. So CSS gave you way more flexibility on stuff that you could do with your web content. Okay, taking this along with some of the stuff I gave at the booklet that I already have linked to my website, just to show you some of the stuff I've given in the past on this. But you can see, I think right away that this is a powerful feature. If you want to make a website and really change the appearance, just skip ahead to CSS part. CSS is going to give you way more of that flexibility than you got from regular HTML. There's some stuff in this book about tables. I wouldn't bother with that stuff. Anyways, okay, so there's some description of it. And here you can see the style with the CSS going there, the idea of the rule. And here's just a whole bunch of stuff that can go with that. So, for example, color is something you can do. Style, font size, which we already talked about. You can do line spacing. You can do images, like background images. And actually, let me do one right here. I'm going to change the body tag. I'm going to add a style attribute. I'm going to change the background. Whoops. Again, I'm going to leave some space here. Actually, no, this one I won't. I'll do it this way. Background color. Okay. And as you can see, very much like our Java coding, you get some online little helpful things here, right? That you can read about these different things. And it's really powerful, all the stuff you can do. So I'm going to do a background color. And for this, I'm actually going to use, as it shows, I believe it showed, it didn't show it here, but font family, font size, font weight, font style, color. Yeah, here we go with color. There is some really neat things you can do with color. I'm trying to remember this, so this might not work. But I'm going to say RGB. Yeah, this should work. Of, say, 0, 0, 255. And you might remember that means 0 red, 0 green, maximum blue. And actually, what I'll do is I'll 255, 0. So this is a lot more like the type of coding you're used to. In terms of the abilities you have to make things look a certain way, is to call a method, which is what's happening. It's calling a built-in method to set the red, green, and blue for the background of this page, which is pretty powerful, right? I could have done that down here as well to change the color of this. I don't know why they use just color, not font color, but they did. RGB of, say, let's just go. That rule to the website, and there you go. So you can see you've got access to those 16 million color options there. Really change around things with that ability. Okay, the next thing I want to show you guys, and again, please let me know if you have any questions about this. I'm going to give you all those resources. So if you're thinking, I wonder what all the kinds of things I can look up and change. There's tons of them, right? I've provided a small list here: text decoration, text indenting, text aligning, line height, word spacing. You can actually space out your words. Letter spacing. You can actually space out your letters. And you can actually use negative numbers to pull the letters together. All kinds of weird things. Actually, let me show you that one. That one's a weird one, just for fun. Watch that one. If I go letter... And I'm going to apply a rule that it's negative 0.5 and, sorry, how did yeah, millimeters. I'm going to use millimeters as the measurement system and run that. You'll see what weird things it does to the words my web content. Enough. I'm going to make it more. It did pull it in. I'm going to make it negative 2.5. Let's see what that does. Yeah, look at that. Isn't that weird? It actually pulls the letters together in that way. Okay? But I could also use word spacing in a weird way. Okay? So the space between the words, I could make 10 millimeters. Right? And it could be applying all of those rules at once. So here you can see the words are 10 millimeters apart, but the letters are actually negatively spaced on top of each other. So it's weird. You got all kinds of power there with that. Okay, so that's the basics of the CSS rule as it applies. But that is applying it inline. Okay, just like you can change the HTML. And actually, let's do that. Let's while I'm here. I'm also going to put a regular font tag. Oops. Good old font tag that opens here. And I'll just actually change it around the word my and closes here. So just the word my is going to get its font changed. And for these last couple rules that I did, I'm going to comment them out. And yeah, you've got some ability to do that. So those rules aren't applying. And maybe I'll comment out the color too. Okay, so there, the size and the font itself are changed. So font face equals, so obviously I had Arial up here. I'm going to switch to Consolis right here. So which of these will get applied? Like right here I'm saying change the word my to Consolis, but up here I'm saying change the font to Arial. And this is where the cascade effect happens. Which happens first and which takes precedence. Kind of like, again, the way we have inheritance in that. And you can see right there, actually, why don't I pick a little more noticeable, like times new. There you go. So the HTML is actually done first. So the way I was describing this was actually backwards. The linked is at the bottom. The HTML is processed first, then the inline CSS, then the embedded CSS, and then the linked. And we'll see that. So right now it is running the HTML. It first tried to do the inline. Okay, but then now it's been overridden by the HTML. But now we're going to change something about the embedded here. Okay, and then we'll get to the linked as well. But okay, so here's what I'm looking at. With that in place, the next thing we're going to do is up in the head section. So the head section of a website isn't part of the body. It isn't really something you see. But up in the head section, you can create a style tag. It looks like this, okay? And then that style tag will define a style for the entire website. Okay? However, there's a little more to the style tag than this, even though this is the way it starts, and then yes, the style tag closes that way as well. Here I actually have to give it an attribute. I have to say which type of style it is, because when they first made the style tag, they allowed for more than CSS, and they still do. So style type equals, and I'm going to say text/CSS. That's the way it happens. So now what it's saying is, okay, I want you to change the style for everything in the body, but now the way you do it is, and this, let me put in that comment again. This, and I will share this with you guys. This is a embedded. So it's embedded in the entire page is this CSS, okay? And I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to say for every div tag, for every single div tag you encounter, here are the rules for that div tag. So what you do is you put the tag you're affecting, and then an opening curly and a closing curly, and in between you can just lay out all the CSS rules you want. So the same kind of rules I have here. So I'm going to take these two rules, put them back up here, and change the value of them. So I'm going to say, you know what, for every div tag you encounter, switch to Tahoma size 50. Okay. Every div tag you encounter, do that. Tahoma size 50. Okay. So you already have one div tag. I'm going to add a second div tag. Div, another divider that has more text. And I'm going to close that div tag. So if this tag here wasn't here, so I'm just going to cut this for now. I'll paste it back in a second. Okay. Right now, my entire body just has one div tag, and it's saying for every div tag you encounter, make it Tahoma size 50. And there it is, Tahoma size 50. Okay. Go to Tahoma size 10. Okay. Now I'm going to paste that other div tag in. Now in this div tag, I've changed the CSS with a different inline style. So for this CSS, I'm saying now switch it to Arial size 20. Okay. Actually, let me put these put this one first. this div tag, and then I come up on this div tag. Let's see what happens. So sure enough, this div tag follows the rule of Tahoma size 20. This div tag follows a different rule, Arial, and then finally, this little piece of web content follows the HTML rule, and that's the cascade. So it went, right, it sort of cascades up or down, whichever way you want to visualize it. So it did my embedded CSS, then it did my inline CSS, finally then it does my HTML. So it's applying all the rules at once, right? One is overriding the other. So it's kind of cool because now you could change every div tag on the page. So you wouldn't have to waste your time doing this for every single div tag. You could just say, here's the rule for all the div tags. Okay? Here's the rule for the body of this website. For the body, I'm going to move this rule up here. So that's the body, and then I wouldn't need it here because it's just affecting the entire body. Oops. But this way, and it would still apply, right? And then let's say later on I had a horizontal rule or an image tag. Okay. I could change, for example, every horizontal rule on the page in that way and apply some sort of rule could be applied here. I'm not going to bother with a rule, but it would change every single horizontal rule on the page to do that. So this is just, again, the start of this, but it would absolutely allow you to start setting up a big system to start changing the appearance of your website. Meanwhile, the HTML part would just be structure, right? It would just be some div tags, some horizontal rule tags. So let me just show you kind of what I mean. Like in a normal sort of website that's using CSS, you just have like, okay, this is my title of my page. And let's say I start a paragraph of text, and I put some text, and then I close off my paragraph, and then let's say I had a horizontal rule. You get the idea, right? And then maybe an image, and then maybe a link and stuff like that. And then the word sum I wanted to change. So another tag I could use is what's called a span tag. Span tag is a little simpler than a div tag. It just spans one area to the other, okay? So normally that wouldn't actually make a change. So for now, I'm going to cut this out. So as if this embedded CSS wasn't there. Run this. You can see there that's just regular CSS right there. Title, put some text, and then a horizontal rule. This has got inline CSS. Then I'm going to put it back. Okay? So now it changes every div and every body. And how about I change every span tag? And every span tag, what I'll do is I'll apply a rule like, let's try weight. That one. Simple one, but so this is essentially creating a bold tag here for every place a span tag appears. You can see that right there, right? So it's making it a little bit bolder. That's a simple one, but you get the idea that now this would apply in a bigger way. Now what I would refer you to, if you want to go into much more detail on that, is what I described with that. This is the basic CSS that you got here. If I now move up to what I taught at the 40S level with CSS, and again, I'm going to give you more references for this. What you'd have here is even more details of some of the stuff you could do with that. So jump ahead to that more advanced CSS. So here you can see exactly what I was just showing you, this ability to apply a rule to all the paragraphs. And then this would be every single link, every single anchor would go that way. Okay? Every paragraph would follow this rule. Okay? Okay. The final way you can apply this is actually to a separate document, a sheet, okay, which I'm going to hopefully give it to me. Oh yeah, a cascading style sheet right here. These are my, I'm just going to call it styles. Okay. So this is going to create a separate document that ends in .css. This is a specific style sheet. You can see here, just put some comments in there. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to set a rule right here that every span tag follows this rule. So if you see a span tag, then let's see, what would be a cool thing to try? Let's just change the color. The color of every span tag will be, I'm going to make it white. So 255, 255, 255. So every single span tag that you encounter will be white. However, this is a separate document, right? So in no way is this document connected to that document. Well, it's about to be. I'm about to now move up to the third level, which is how do I link a separate style sheet to a website? You're thinking, well, what's the point of all this? Why would I bother doing all these different levels of that? Well, step back for a second and think about it. You could link one style sheet to 1,000 websites or web pages. And if you change things in that one style sheet, it would affect the entire branch of all of those websites. And that's where the power again starts to show. So if you were making a website for a company, and all of a sudden the company decided to change their colors because their marketing department said, oh, we want to now go with a blue-green marketing, you wouldn't want to go into all 1,000 websites and change all that code. You could change it in the one style sheet and it would cascade through all the websites. Okay. Sorry, I need a peanut. I was feeling a little peckish. Okay, so here's how you do that. Up in the head section, you say link relative, or rel, equals style sheet. Okay, so this is the format, the syntax for that. Type equals text/CSS. Whoa, that's not what's supposed to happen. href equals. So now you actually have to create a link, like a hypertext link to, and I believe I just called it style. Okay, and then this is a self-terminating. Okay. All right, what did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? Oh, double quote here. So this is now connecting this to that one. So I'm going to cut this out for now. And it's saying, go to this other style sheet. And if you encounter a span tag anywhere in the HTML, which we have one, then I want you to change the color of it to white. Let's see what happens. Well, it's white, all right. But I can't see it because I've lost my color for my background of my page. So let's add that as a rule too, just while we're on this. Every body tag you encounter, which would be for every body tag, the background color, oops, not image, although that's cool, would be, and here I'm actually just going to use a word. I'm just going to say yellow. You can name some colors just by name. And that should, yeah, there we go. And there's the white on there, you can see, right? Make it a little more pronounced. Okay, so it's doing that. Now, the one thing I also had still copied in my code was I still have that, which is the embedded CSS. Now, the embedded CSS says, here's a few more rules to apply. Then I come down to the inline CSS, okay? And so I just want to put a comment above this one. This is the linked CSS to a separate style sheet, which is just a file. Good. There we go. All the rules are applying. So with all this power that's built into CSS at the different levels, using the idea of setting up rules, okay, you can do really powerful design elements to this stuff. All right, it's 147. I'm just going to jump back here. So again, looking at the Red River content here, students will create a properly structured and valid web page using XHTML and HTML5 and CSS. You're on the way to this. I want to talk a little bit about JavaScript in a second. Okay, my to-do HTML tags, attributes, CSS rules, embedded, inlined, and linked. I'm going to give you a ton of resources to this stuff. W3 Schools is probably my favorite. So just to show you what W3 Schools teaches about this stuff, you'll find is a lot of the same stuff I talked about. Styling with the CSS, internal or inline, external, okay, which, and there's lots of different examples here. Very similar to the examples that I did with you guys, right? And then it goes through tons of different resources, borders and padding and all kinds of really cool stuff you can do. But that's a real crash course in web coding, okay? Now, you might think, do you use that stuff for your site, Mr. Watts? No, I cheat a little bit. I use WordPress. But when I go and edit, say, our class website, and I go to actually change the appearance of it, it uses very much like NetBeans designer code. It allows you to do like traditional bolding and italicizing and stuff like that. But what it ends up doing is writing web code for you. So very much like Visual Studio did with its designer. But I can still go in and adjust that HTML any way I want. So I can look at heading tags. I can look at comment tags. I can look at this stuff. And I could, if I wanted to, actually go in and change the style of it if I really wanted to, understanding what's going on there a little bit. Okay. I have on occasion done that, depending on kind of what I was looking for with that. I'm no big designer on this stuff, but I have worked in this area before. Okay? All right. The final thing I want to show you was a little introduction to the concept of JavaScript. And JavaScript is just one thing that I could be introducing you. I could be introducing you to PHP or MySQL. What now you're doing is connecting web code, CSS, HTML, etc., to another programming language, one that actually has maybe a little more of a programming feel to it. So that's what we're going to do next, and just a real simple example. Okay. All right, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go here, and I'm going to stay inside the head of this. So I'm still inside the head of this website that we have. Okay, I'm not in the body. Because remember, the body is the part the user sees. That's the part of it that they see. The head they don't see, but the head you can make, it's like header, right? You change things about the website in the header, and then it affects the body. So it's affected by the header. Okay. All right, so So what I'm going to put here now is a tag called a script. Opening and closing. I think I do know. Normally with script tags, you also define like what type of script it is, right? Yeah. Equals Java. Could be wrong, but we'll get to that in a minute. Okay. So what I'm going to now do, what it now has done, is it now switches again. Okay. So the script tag switches to another programming language. In this case, JavaScript. So now I'm going to say, you know what? I want to write some JavaScript code right here and have it inside my website. So this says, okay, I'm going to change programming languages here. Now, just as a side note, I'm not going to do it, but you can also link to a separate JavaScript page that has all the scripts on it there as well. So the same way you link to a style sheet, you can actually link, I think you can just href to that, but I'm not going to do that. And I'm going to use some basic JavaScript. I'm going to use what's called an alert. Okay. And a semicolon. So what I just wrote is JavaScript. This is JavaScript. The way you could think of it is equivalent to a JOption pane window, or if you're back in C#, a message box window. Okay. But I need to call this somehow, right? Like, when would this appear? So when would this thing actually appear? Well, let's just see. If just I left that alone and I went to my page, there you can see the alert is being called. It's saying hello, right? Or, I should, for good luck. Okay. So there you can see my alert window is being popped up here, essentially like a message box. That would be a way that JavaScript could work to start doing some of that extra coding. Okay? But what more so you do is you place something like this inside of a method, or in JavaScript, it's called a function. Okay? So I'm going to make a function called message. And like a lot of functions, I can pass it a message or a piece of text. The function opens, the function closes. This is inside the function. You're like, what is val? In JavaScript, all variables, are called var for variable. And I'm going to take that text and add it or concatenate it onto my message hello world. Okay. So now, if I can call this function, it would work, okay, theoretically. All right. So in order to make this work, I've got to add some ability for this to do this. So what I could do is I can add it to my body tag. I could say onLoad equals message hi. So I'm going to try to say hi, which should call my function up here theoretically when this thing loads. Let's see, did I screw it up? I screwed it up. Okay. So that is actually the best way to do it. I'm going to try it a different way. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a tag down here, what's called a button tag. That's what you might think of more along the lines of, is this button will be clicked on. Okay. So with this button, I've got to find a few attributes for it. So the type of button is a button. And on click, I will have it call my message and say I'm going to go back here for 1 sec. Just take that out. And let's see what happens. You're getting, obviously, I'm layering in a lot more complexity here. There's a button, and try to click it, but nothing is happening. Do this message, and something's wrong with my message here. What did I do wrong here? Missing a bracket. Yeah, maybe that is correct. Nope. Okay. I'm not going to waste you guys' time. I'm going to wrap up today and provide these links for you. So again, just like I just showed you as a basic flawed example, W3 Schools has a great examples of how to use JavaScript along with other things that would be coming up in things that you would be studying here. You can see a lot more. JavaScript is a whole programming language. So you can learn about if statements and loops and variables and all the stuff that's a big part of using JavaScript. So it's a big concept. Okay, and here, this is a great summary, great way to end. HTML, which includes both XHTML and HTML5, defines the content. CSS defines the look or the layout, and JavaScript defines a behavior, like an action. It's not the only thing you can use, okay? And then things like databases can be connected to that. All more power. So that's why web programmers is a powerful feature. It is a really good industry to get into that you can look into with the skill set that you guys have, right? So again, what I hope is this little crash course prepares you guys for web coding in general and the Red River program specifically. Okay. That's it. I'm wrapping up here with this today and saying goodbye to you guys. I'm not even sure who's still on the line. Thanks for tuning in, you guys. Hopefully you heard all that and saw all that and grabbed a little bit of interesting content out of that. By the way, I hope you guys got my notes that I left on your yard signs. And if you didn't, I had left a little note, a little card at the bottom of each of your yard signs that I put in your yards. And if another teacher put your yard sign there, I actually tracked you down and put a yard sign note on for you as well. Congratulations on those yard signs. Congratulations on graduating. Feel free to email me if you have any questions about the content from today, or if you have other ideas of things you'd like to see. I already told you what's planned for next week. So I'll just say goodbye right now and shut off my video.